Congratulations, Mr. Rapporteur. The debate is now over and the vote will take place tomorrow. Now we move on to the next debate on the agenda, the report by Mr. Nacho Sanchez Amor, the Commission report on Türkiye of 2023 and 2024. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Sanchez Amor.
Gracias. Thank you, President, Commissioner. I'd like to thank all of the shadows that I'm working with this very important report now. There's diverging opinions, but I think we have had very open negotiations, and hopefully this can lead us to a better relationship between the EU and the Turkey. Now, the key point here is distinguishing between being a member of the EU or being an ally of the EU. And so why are we insisting on this when we've not done this in the past? Because if you look at the Turkish press, pro-government Turkish press, there's nationalist propaganda. This propaganda is saying that our military power will open the doors to being a member of the EU. This is obviously circulating a falsehood around public opinion, and we think we need to disabuse this. This will not happen. There are no shortcuts to becoming a member to the EU. You need to be a mature democracy based on values. Obviously, if you want to be an ally, you want to be a friend of the EU, it's different. But accession is a non-negotiable path. It's not a transactional agreement. It's built on mutual trust and shared interests. That's why the accession process is frozen for Turkey, and it's been frozen since 2013. There's no good news in relation to rule of law in terms of freedoms. There's been repression which has affected every corner of society. If there's any criticism in society, it's repressed. Even innocent people. We're seeing journalists, activists, students being repressed, members of the opposition. Leaders of the largest business organisation have been repressed, and we've also seen a Swedish journalist as well. And we also have Mr. Imamoglu, who has been detained, and it's perhaps the worst of all the detentions of recent years, and shows the authoritarian nature of the regime. Essentially, it is incompatible with the idea of being a member of the EU. But obviously, Turkey is also a neighbour and can be an ally in different aspects of our relationship. Turkey makes us consider it as a possible ally only if they abandon the democratic reforms that they are implementing and they come back to this path towards accession. Now, Turkey is important from a security point of view, and it's important to highlight this because they've been a member of NATO since 1952. At times you read the Turkish press and you hear about the importance of Turkey for Western security. It seems as though Turkey is going to be asking to join NATO. They've been a member of NATO since 1952. However, Turkey only aligns with 5% of our foreign policy, and this is you see that it may seem it's a problem with the figures, but it's not. And they also have Russian missiles as well. So these are points that Turkey needs to look at. And they're not aligned with our common foreign and security policy. And if we want to improve our relationship, they need to look at this. Now, the economy. The economy is also something which is closely linked to the rule of law. The fact of legal certainty or lack of legal certainty in court cases is chasing away investors. And if you persecute business leaders, that doesn't help either. We also defend the continuity of high-level dialogue with Turkey. We need to open up the partnership chapter, and we need to continue with the high-level dialogues with Turkey. But we need to obviously make sure this is not confused with the accession procedure. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc și eu. O invit.
Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Commissioner Marta Kos.
Mr. President, dear members of the European Parliament, dear Rapporteur, Mr. Nacho Sanchez-Amor, I would like to thank to this House and in particular Rapporteur and the members of the AFET Committee for your comprehensive report on Turkey. Your report aligns closely with the Commission's report of 2023 and 24 and reflects the latest developments on the ground in Turkey. It also clearly illustrates enduring challenges in EU-Turkey relations. In recent years, a range of issues has placed considerable strain on our relations with the country. Despite Turkey's repeated declarations that EU accession remains its strategic objective, this declared intention has not been accompanied by tangible progress, notably when it comes to fundamental freedoms and the rule of law. The negative trends that led to a standstill in the accession negotiations in 2018 unfortunately persist. Since 23, however, we have witnessed a welcome de-escalation in the eastern Mediterranean, the resumption of bilateral talks between Greece and Turkey, and the revival of the informal UN-facilitated discussions on the Cyprus issue, held in a constructive atmosphere, with both sides demonstrating a clear commitment to advancing the talks. We have seen a continued positive cooperation on migration management and trade issues. These positive steps must be mentioned and deepened through Turkey's constructive engagement with the EU and all member states. Regrettably, the de-escalation on the foreign policy front and good cooperation on sectoral issues has not been matched by progress on domestic reforms. Since the start of this year, we have observed again worrying developments in Turkey on the rule of law and human rights, alongside a continued failure to address the Commission's long-standing recommendations. These issues remain a serious concern for the EU as they lie at the heart of our relationship. The overly broad use of the anti-terror legislation, targeting of political parties and the curtailment of media freedom are major setbacks and contravene Turkey's international obligations, particularly those guaranteeing freedom of expression and association. Moreover, the detention of Istanbul's democratically elected mayor, Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu, together with the arrests and charges brought against elected officials, political activists, civil society and business representatives, journalists and others, raises serious questions about Turkey's commitment to its own democratic traditions, and I have already spoken about these concerns in this House before. Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention remains a major disappointment, and thus its continued failure to implement the legally binding ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, including those on Mr. Demirtas and Mr. Kavala. It is our shared interest to see Turkey firmly anchored in the values we uphold as a Union. We will therefore continue to consistently and constructively raise our concerns regarding the rule of law and the protection of fundamental rights with our Turkish partners. Honourable members, the EU has a strategic interest in fostering a cooperative, mutually beneficial partnership with Turkey and in promoting its stability and prosperity, and Turkey is also our strategic trade partner. In April 24, the European Council endorsed a phased, proportionate and reversible approach to engaging with Turkey, setting the stage for deeper cooperation in areas of mutual interest. This approach reflects and reinforces the joint communication of November 23 on the state of play of EU-Turkey political, economic and trade relations. Since then, several key developments advanced this agenda. High-level dialogues on various sectoral issues, including on trade and economy, have driven this agenda forward. I can confirm the constructive exchange in the high-level economic dialogue in which I participated. Our economic and trade relationship is stronger than ever. The numbers speak for themselves. Trade between us hit a record high of 206 billion in 24. The European Union is Turkey's largest trade and investment partner. Our intention is to strengthen this further. Turkey's non-alignment with EU sanctions has posed challenges, Though recent engagements have led to progress in preventing the circumvention of EU measures, and although concerns persist, for example, over suspected false transit of exports, Turkey continues to engage constructively on this key issue. The EU continues to pursue its priorities and to boost investments in the areas of mutual interest, notably by supporting investment in strategic sectors such as climate, the green transition, renewable energy and energy efficiency, job creation and urban development. The 2016 EU-Turkey statement on migration continues to yield results. Irregular arrivals from Turkey to the EU have fallen by 33% so far in this year compared with the same period last year. Of course, challenges remain and must be addressed jointly in line with the statement and its commitments to prevent irregular crossings and to resume returns of Syrians from the Greek islands. Turkey continues efforts to host Syrian refugees, and the EU supports these efforts without substantial support. Given Turkey's strategic position and influence, constructive engagement with Ankara is essential to address shared challenges together and foster regional stability. Turkey plays a crucial role as a regional actor in the Eastern Mediterranean, in ensuring security in the Black Sea and in enhancing connectivity and energy transit. At the same time, I am committed to closely monitoring domestic developments in Turkey. I will not hesitate to convey to my Turkish interlocutors that continuing backsliding in the areas of the rule of law, fundamental rights and judicial independence constitutes a serious obstacle to deepening our cooperation. The rule of law is non-negotiable. It is a core principle that underpins any credible partnership with the European Union. And I will also continue to support Turkish civil society, which plays a crucial role in promoting democratic values, fostering dialogue and building bridges between our peoples. And finally, progress on the Cyprus issue remains essential. A fair, comprehensive and viable settlement in line with the relevant UN Security Council resolution is key for advancing EU-Turkey relations. I trust you will agree with me that Turkey must seize the opportunity to demonstrate its commitment to a new direction, one that lays the foundations for a stronger relationship with our Union. And the EU stands ready to work on renewed and enhanced cooperation with Turkey. However, meaningful cooperation requires reciprocity, and we expect Turkey to show how far it is willing to walk the path with us.
Mulțumim, doamna comisar.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we open the debate with the interventions on behalf of the political groups. The first speaker is Isabel Wissler-Lima from the EPP.
Turkey is a candidate for accession to the EU. Turkey chose to be a candidate country, and as such, we address these remarks to Turkey. Our concern relates to the values on which the EU is based, democracy and the rule of law. But the situation of democracy in Turkey is more than a concern. When the judiciary's independence is rocked, when the main leader of the opposition and the mayor of Istanbul is put in prison, we can legitimately ask the question as to what space is left for democracy in Turkey. This is the most symbolic example. I mention only this one, but there are other locally elected officials who've been forced out by the government. Over and above politicians, civil society is also seeing its room for action restricted. Look at journalists, for example. Independence and freedom of the press are essential parts of any democratic society. But journalists can't exercise their profession freely in Turkey, and many of them have indeed been arrested, and that's a very alarming state of affairs. Restricting the democratic space runs counter to the aspirations of a large proportion of the Turkish population to join the EU. Now, we have a lot of time for those aspirations. We know that they want to be part of Europe, but recent developments really run in the opposite direction to what is needed if we're to pick up negotiations on accession again. Now, we recognise the role that Turkey is playing in the region. Turkey is a member of NATO. Its geographical position and its diplomatic weight, it can make a real contribution to regional stability, and we welcome its cooperative efforts in the area of migration. But in its capacity as a candidate country of the EU, we expect that Turkey behaves in a way that is consistent with the principles involved in the EU. So solidarity between allies, respecting international law, supporting independence and respecting the sovereignty of states. We're not very near any of that. So the message is simple. The door is not closed, but if Turkey wants to come through and pick up accession negotiations, then they have to respect the principles on which our union was built.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Wiesler-Lima. On behalf of the S&D Group, the speaker is Maniatis.
Dear colleagues, once again, we see that Turkey is distancing itself from Europe with constant infringement of the rule of law and human rights. And at the same time, it is provocative in the Eastern Mediterranean, in Cyprus, and in our neighbourhood. And they threaten us with casus belli. And I'd like to thank our rapporteur who did accept the rewording I'd asked for that point. Because of these Turkish provocations, the interconnection of Cyprus and Greece for electricity, which was a European top 10 project, has stopped in our exclusive economic zone. And as we will discuss tomorrow, the President, Mr. Erdogan, has repeated again his opposition to any attempts to reunify Cyprus when he visited the occupied part, in spite of the numerous resolutions of the UN and the European Union. If they keep being the international disruptor, they cannot be a member of the European Union, they cannot be considered a trustworthy ally, and they cannot participate in initiatives for European defence. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mrs. Nicola Bartuszek from PFE.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear colleagues. Allow me to thank the reporter, Mr. Sanchez, for the constructive discussion during our meetings. Nevertheless, the Patriots for Europe cannot agree with many points of this report. While the report offers some valuable insights, in our opinion, it lacks clarity in certain areas and avoids addressing key issues. Turkey is undoubtedly an important and strategic partner of the European Union in the areas of trade, migration, management and within NATO. But let us be clear. Turkey does not meet most of the accession criteria necessary for the membership in the European Union. Unfortunately, some topics are mentioned in the report only marginally. A major issue, in my view, is the unresolved relationship with Cyprus and Turkey's problematic involvement in the Middle East. Unlike the European Union, Turkey does not consider Hamas a terrorist organisation, which raises legitimate questions and concerns. Many of Turkey's recent actions have unfortunately drifted away from European values. I believe this debate will benefit from a politically and diplomatically grounded discussion. Despite all criticism, it is important to maintain dialogue and seek new forms of strategic partnership, particularly in the fields of trade, energy and migration. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of ECR, I give the floor to Mr. Hadis Hadi.
We have the new report on Turkey here, and after our interventions we managed to have a stricter text as the one that was prepared initially. But the references where they call them a strategic ally are a big issue for us. Are they a strategic ally for us? Turkey is synonymous to terrorism, to infringing law, which is threatening Cyprus and Greece with war, undermining the whole of the European Union. Dear colleagues, Turkey does not understand good manners, and our position here should change radically. We need to impose serious sanctions, stop any European funding, do not allow any agreement on defence, and veto the sale of military equipment to Turkey, and stop the accession process. Once it turns from a criminal into a state, then perhaps we could have a positive assessment here. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Renew Europe, Malik Asmani has the floor.
Very much, Mr. President, dear Commissioner Kos. The Parliament is about to adopt a yearly progress report on the relationship between the EU and Turkey, and I would like to first express my gratitude towards the rapporteur, Mr. Sanchez Amar, and for all his efforts for his inclusive process towards this report. And the message is clear: to help keep Europe and the Ukraine safe, the EU needs to work more closely also with Turkey in response also to the Russia aggression. Europe's security structure is changing, and this is a new reality. A stronger partnership with Turkey is not just a good idea, it is a strategic need. The Parliament makes this clear also in the report. And the EU also has a responsibility by setting clear expectations when it comes to core values like democracy, human rights and the rule of law. So, dear Commissioner Kos, take this report seriously. Use it not only to point out Turkey's shortcomings, use it also to build a smart EU strategy that combines closer cooperation with firm and principled pressure. A strategy that could guide Turkey in the right direction that supports both our interests. That is not just the right thing to do, that is also a win-win. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, on behalf of the Greens, Mr. Vladimir Prebic.
Thank you very much. 50 days have passed since Imamoglu has been detained, half a year since human rights activists have been thrown in jail. Thousands of journalists are still in jail. This is Erdogan's Turkey. We need to be clear about that. The media, judiciary, this is a challenge for democratic values. Silence is not neutrality. Silence is complicity. Europe needs to have a clear response to this. We need to support civil society. We need to try and get the journalists out of prison. This is not a fight between East and West. This is a fight against good and evil. We need to be clear about this. People in Turkey are not our enemies. We listen to you, we can hear you, and we not walk away.
Thank you, Hugh, on behalf of the left.
First of all, I'd like to thank the rapporteur on his text, because he did try to give us a balanced, under the circumstances text, a text which has many fair and right references on the bizonal federative solution and the rejection of the two states, giving back Varossia to the legal owners, finding out what happened to the missing, and also the Turkish Cypriot community moving away from the close embrace of Ankara, also the criteria of Copenhagen and recognizing all member states, and also the criticism on democracy, rule of law, and human rights. But, Commissioner, can you think of Turkey as a strategic ally? Give them a better customs union, a strategic partnership, more privileges and no obligations. Mr. Amor, you made good progress in this report, but it's the Commission and the Council which rule the day, and they're ready to give nearly everything to Erdogan. And he sent you a message from Famagusta. He said, I don't care what you say. We have the blue homeland. I don't want reunification. I am the lone cowboy. But why do you put up with it? Is it in your interest?
On behalf of the ESN, Mr. Fröhlich has the floor.
Herr Präsident,
Honourable President, well, Turkey is not a liberal democracy. It's a sovereign state with a remarkable national strategy, and it takes its own path between tradition and modernity. We respect this. You don't. They criticize the Turkey that has removed itself from the Istanbul Agreement, and 6 other countries have done this too. You criticize Turkey because of its role in Ukraine, but they have really negotiated the grain agreement. I mean, what values basically are we talking about? Cancelled elections in Romania and certain court cases and results which are questionable in France. We feel that this is a sovereign country. We should not give in to the pressure from outside. We criticize Turkey when they do this to us. The effect of Islamist organizations should be stopped. But there's no reference to this in the report. We reject certain aspects of Turkey, basically because of the money that we are paying, and we haven't gotten anything in return. But we need to keep our partnership with Turkey in the area of energy, in the area of migration, of geopolitics, but all of this from outside the European Union. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Emanuel Kefalogiannis.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, the report of the European Parliament reflects the fact that Turkey is on a dangerous totalitarian path. It infringes the values and principles in the acquis, in rule of law, in democracy, and in good neighbourhood policies. Over time, they've been infringing the resolutions of the UN, and they threaten with war, grants for war, casus belli, members of the European Union, Greece and Cyprus, and for foreign and defence policy, they align with the European Union in under 5% of the cases. And sometimes it actually stands against us with Ukraine, with Libya, with the Middle East, with the Caucasus, with Syria. Turkey does not have a role in our defence architecture. And from the billions and millions which will go to European defence and the amount that we are also nationally spending in accordance with the decisions of the European Council of December 2008 and October 2019, and also the reports of the European Parliament and the European Commission, this cannot happen. And through this report we're sending a loud message of concern and worry to Turkey on its path for accession. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mrs. Ioana Shoring-Vilgus.
President, Commissioner, we can't pretend that we don't see or hear something. And we can't pretend that you can take shortcuts in the accession process. Turkey isn't going to get into the EU at the moment. It's not normal that protesters are arrested. It's not normal that journalists are being arrested for telling the truth. It's not normal that local government elected officials are arrested because they won the elections. That is not normality. It's not normal that more than 300 women were murdered last year and 290 died in circumstances that are yet to be clarified. This is not normal. Erdogan's Turkey is not going to get into the EU. Turkey, without Erdogan, could get into the EU. And as a Pole, I would like to wish Turkish citizens the following. Erdogan will not be around forever. One day he'll be gone, and when he's gone, you can accede to the EU.
The next speaker is Mrs. Latinopoulou.
Have you forgotten we're talking about an enemy of the European Union? A president who, without blushing, says that his target is to make Europe Muslim. A country which is governed by a dictator, and we call it a democracy. Turkey, which threatens Greece with casus belli if it uses its sovereign rights. A rapacious state, murder of half of Cyprus, when Cyprus is a member state and which doesn't recognize the invasion. Turkey, which 6 years ago attacked Greece with a hybrid war using illegal migrants. Erdogan, who in public speeches says they will come at night to take over the Aegean. Is this country we're talking about? Well, we should not even be discussing them here. While our Cyprus is under invasion, our Greece is threatened openly. It is a semi-dictatorship. We see any idea, not for 2025, for 3025 should be prohibited. I understand that it's a lot of money for some of us here, but that is the truth. Turkey is not an ally. It is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It uses invasions, blackmail, and the blood of innocents. It's not part of Europe. It's part of darkness, and it's trying to introduce darkness with religion and fear. It is the enemy of everybody in the European Union, and as such should be dealt with. And as long as I can, I promise that that is what I will do. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Emanuel Frakos. We have a lot of Greek speakers.
Thank you. In this discussion with Turkey, we can't be moderate. On the one side, it's us who see a country which in its history can be compared to Nazi Germany, which is leading terrorist organization, which is stamping out civilization everywhere, which is a system which stains everything with mafia, illegal trades. And on the other hand, you have the children of Chamberlain, and they don't want to look if millions of people in Turkey or in Africa or in Asia are the victims of Turkey's colonization, of these dehuman Nazis. They are at the center of the axis of evil. They are a noose around our throats. Colleagues, please inform yourselves about the genocides of Christians that's still going on. It's bloodthirsty. It's attacks against neighboring countries. Inform yourself, and that's enough. It's not just that we shouldn't be financing Turkey. It's not that we should not just allowing it through the back door to our defense, but we need sanctions. We need the army of all of us at the Turkish borders. Thank you.
Mrs. Yar is next.
Thank you. Let me be a bit personal today. I fell in love with Turkey about 20 years ago. And I believe many of you might have had the same experience discovering a country while traveling and instantly falling in love with its people, culture, its soul. But since that first visit, my heart has been breaking down again and again every time a Turkish friend calls me, tells me they are leaving the country, that the situation is becoming dire, that they are losing hope. Because, and let's be clear, you cannot imprison your main political opponent and still call yourself a democracy. But unfortunately, this isn't just about Turkey, right? Across Europe, authoritarians are learning from each other, from Ankara to Budapest to Bratislava. Condemning such actions is not enough, dear European Union. We need to act upon our values, our principles. We need to ask, every time we meet them, our Turkish counterparts, about Osman, about Fiden, about Selahattin, about Ekrem, every time we talk to them. And we need to stand with those who are fighting for freedom in Turkey or across the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Melissa Camara.
Chers collègues,
Dragi colegi, domnul comisar, ce se întâmplă în momentul de față în Turcia este grav. Arestarea primarului Istanbulului, reprimarea manifestațiilor de 1 mai, arestările masive, toate acestea sunt mărturii ale unei derive autoritare.
malgré la violence, la société turque continue de se tenir debout. Je pense à ces étudiantes, ces étudiants, à ces femmes, à ces syndicalistes, à ces citoyennes et citoyens qui descendent dans la rue, qui chantent, qui résistent. Je pense à celles et ceux qui ont passé des jours en prison.
Thinking about those who have been in prison for days and still locked up, and think about those who are being repressed. Their courage, their dignity, their determination is admirable, but in fact it goes beyond that. It's a call for a better world, a reminder that even in the darkest day there is a light which never goes out. At the heart of the repression there is a society which is resisting, which day after day proves that liberty, freedom never dies as long as there is some way to defend it. That Turkey is the Turkey we need to listen to. Turkey that fights for democracy, freedom and justice.
Merci. Urmează doamna.
Next, Mrs. Özlem Demirel.
Dankeschön, Herr.
Thank you very much, President. More and more unionists in Turkey are telling us that Turkey is turning into Europe's new Bangladesh. And indeed, Turkey is a cheap manufacturing country at the gates of Europe. We see migrants who've flown other authoritarian regimes used as exploited workers in Turkey. And this is all part of the migrant deal, and you want to maintain that deal. This impacts workers in Turkey who are refugees, but it also impacts workers in Europe. This report rightly talks about human rights violations in Turkey, repression of the opposition, and that's quite right. But what are those statements worth if there are no consequences? We're talking about military cooperation being bolstered. Turkey can produce cheaper munitions for Europe so that our own geopolitical interests can be defended around the world. That's hypocrisy, it's cynical, and in the left we object to that.
Thank you, Mr. Kostas Papadakis has the floor.
Yes, we also offer a condemnation for this Turkish proposal for having two states, and also for the continuation of the occupation for so many years, and while there's negotiating to sell out the island, while they were on the path to accession, and because they are considered an ally, and contrary to what the main parties say in Greece, the middle classes in Turkey have promoted everything, the Turkish-Libya agreements, the memorandum, the grey areas in the Aegean, prosecuting political opposers, invading Syria, and now what we see is a government of new democracy in Greece to promote the smooth waters in the Aegean, which means more exploitation of these waters and bigger problems for the people. This cooperation in NATO is a risk for the people, and they are in no way a pillar of stability and peace.
Thank you, Mr.
President, Commissioner, we would like to thank our friend Mr. Amor for his hard work. To have progress and Turkey in the same phrase is provocative. It is not improving. It is indirect enmity with European values. It walks along the path à la carte with no obligations whatsoever. The dictatorship of Erdogan sends people to prison, journalists, mayors, and threatens 2 member states with war. And we close our eyes and ears because we want to buy cheap goods or we want to sell arms. Some want even to give them a leading role in the European defence architecture. This is not the Europe we believe in. It's a group of interests. And Turkey does not have in such a way role to play in the European Union, and we still talk about geostrategic interests, about progress or everything else. Let's be clear about it. Some in Europe will sell off our values just to do business with Ankara, even though they're occupying European territory in Cyprus. So we should pretend we should stop turning a blind eye, and there are those of us here who will remind you. And Erdogan is talking about 2 states in Cyprus. As long as they're invading and occupying, they have no place in the European family. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mathieu Vallet. Mrs. Mathieu Vallet has the floor.
Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Colleagues, well, Turkey, Germany, Europe, well, we've heard this a lot. Things are keep us together, but a lot of things separate us. The Turkish government is moving this country away. Lack of press freedom, human rights violations, lack of rule of law. So the imprisonment of Imamoglu, the mayor, is really the cherry on the cake. So you can see that a lot of people are out there on the streets, the young people. We show you our solidarity. The Commission needs to guarantee the support for democratic movements. The fact that Erdogan is undermining democratic institutions is something that needs to be put an end to. It is clear, of course, there are no shortcuts for Turkey to enter the European Union, but the door needs to be kept open.
Apologize for not saying the right name. It was Constanzo Vivian. And now Mr. Mathieu Vallet is following.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. President. From 2016, the 9 billion euros which have been sent to Turkey as part of a migration agreement, and what has actually come out of this, a more authoritarian regime which is undermining our interests and even a regime which throws its opponents in jails. This is blackmail against Europe by Erdogan. There's a re-Islamization, and we've been thought they'd left the Muslim Brotherhood ideology behind. They do not represent democracy as we see it. And we need to be clear and say that Turkey will never join the EU. We need to get these billions and give them back to Europeans. They should be used to protect our borders, to support our health staff, and we also need to support our farmers and not financing an authoritarian regime. Now, Europe is the only continent in the world which is paying to weaken itself. And we need to stop this political suicide. Europe needs to protect its own interests.
Merci beaucoup.
The next speaker is Mrs. Tineke Strik.
Dear Commissioner, dear Rapporteur, the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Imamoglu is extremely concerning, but unfortunately not a surprise. It reflects Erdogan's total crackdown on the rule of law and democracy, in which every dissent is met with repression and arbitrary arrests. But I must say, the EU is to a certain extent a partner in crime.
Because we turn a blind eye to the human rights violations, and by doing so, empower autocracy and leave democratic forces out in the cold. We are even funding violations by paying for deportation centres, leading to the illegal detainment, abuse and even death of migrants. There is no right to asylum in Turkey. It is the inconvenient truth that the EU prioritises its own interests on migration, on geopolitics, at the cost of defending and promoting its values, the values that we pretend to protect against Putin and against Trump. It's high time to act accordingly and make the EU credible again, also for the Turkish people. Choose their side. Thank you.
Dank u wel. Urmează Jan.
The next speaker is Jonas Sjöstedt.
Tack, herr talman.
Thank you, President. Last week I was in Ankara on Wednesday, and I was at a court case for Joachim Medin. He's a Swedish journalist who was arrested in Turkey, and he now runs the risk of 12 years imprisonment. Why is he in court? Because he's a journalist, because he wrote about Turkey. There's absolutely no other reason behind this. There are no charges other than that. President, it's quite unacceptable that Turkey arrest Swedish and EU citizens, journalists who have done nothing criminal at all. The Parliament should stand up and make sure that Joachim Medin is freed. I call on all of the Swedish parties in the European Parliament and thank them for calling for his release so that he can go back to his wife. I'd like the Swedish and the EU Commission do more so that he can return home.
There is a blue card in the room from Mrs. Beatrice Timgren. Do you accept?
Tack så mycket. Sverigedemokraterna står bakom fri och oberoende journalistik och vi har...
Thank you. Things are extremely clear. We have criticized the authoritarian regime of Turkey, so therefore we will vote in favor of the resolution to call for the release of the Swedish journalist in Turkey. However, I wanted to ask you, why have you not asked for our signature?
Ja, alla svenska partier kommer att rösta för.
All Swedish parties can call for the release of Joachim Medin. I welcome that. I think there is a majority in the European Parliament behind this, and I welcome your vote too, although we never usually work together with the Swedish Democracy Party because our views are so different. We never have any joint amendments. However, tomorrow we all want to call for Joachim Medin's release.
We missed the Greek language and someone from Greece, and I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Maria Zaharia.
Turkey, the country and the government of Erdogan is a totalitarian state with imperialistic and colonial wars. It infringes democratic values. It puts all opposition into prison, and it threatens Greece with war because it does not accept the inalienable right of my country to extend its sovereign waters to 12 miles. It occupies illegally European territories in Cyprus and doesn't recognize it as a member state. And it announced that it will make 2 countries on the island. And how can we accept this, offering millions just because they keep refugees and migrants outside Europe? and invite them to our councils on defense, that's no geopolitical stability. That is European hypocrisy. He's not our ally. He's a dictator. Don't send them arms. Don't have any financial transactions unless you offer a solution to...
Thank you. The next speaker is Alice Teodorescu-Meve.
Tack. Det fanns en tid då många hoppades att Turkiet...
Thank you. There was a time when all of us thought that Turkey was going to come closer to Europe, to our values, our respect of the rule of law and respect of human rights. But we can now see that the trend has gone in the opposite direction. Under Erdogan's government, we've seen systematic undermining of democracy. The courts are no longer independent. Those who oppose the government are in jails, and there is no freedom of speech. One thing we're particularly worried about is the imprisonment of Joachim Medin. Legal uncertainty is clearly the case here, and you see the undemocratic trend of Turkey. The European Parliament some years ago voted in favour of suspending the accession process to Turkey. But Erdogan has not changed his attitude at all. There is no way in which these negotiations can progress in a credible manner. We need to be very clear in our gestures. We cannot possibly simply suspend the accession process. We need to talk about our basic principles and say that repression is not acceptable.
Thank you. Evin Insir has the floor.
Journalism is not a crime, not in any country. These are the words of the Swedish journalist Joachim Medin from the notorious high-security prison Silivri in Turkey. Joachim must be allowed to return home to his freedom, to his Sophie and their awaiting child immediately. Since March 28, he has been detained in Turkey. The allegations of insulting President Erdogan and membership in terrorist organizations are baseless and lack evidence. So far, the Swedish government has not succeeded in influencing the situation through diplomatic efforts. The foreign minister took time to contact her Turkish counterpart, and as far as we know, the prime minister has not lifted the phone to reach out to his. In this very delicate situation, it is crucial that the Commission and the whole EU stands behind Joachim and demands that he be allowed to return home immediately. He is a Swedish citizen and therefore also a European citizen. It is our duty to defend all our journalists and all our citizens. Joachim's case is also a matter of every journalist's rights to operate freely, beyond oppression and beyond fear.
Thank you. The next speaker is Silvia Sartone.
Turkey is not Europe, and Turkey will never be Europe. And we need to say this very clearly. The accession progress has been suspended and needs to be cancelled without any hesitation. For too many years, the left has taken the wrong attitude, trying to force Turkey into Europe. For too many years, the European Union has spent billions in Ankara in a very blind-sighted way. But today it is waking up to the violations of human rights by the arrests of demonstrators, journalists and opponents. Look at the general Islamic trends of the government. To close our eyes to this type of crime is not acceptable. Turkey can be a trade partner. It can also be a partner at international level. But it is clearly that there are serious cultural and legal differences and also differences on fundamental rights, and therefore it needs to be kept far away from Europe.
Kaja Kallas is basically the foreign minister of EU. And I think she can help my country, Cyprus. Cyprus has been divided since the Turkish invasion in 1974. And as a result, the two communities, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, are living now separately. And this problem remains to this day unsolved. So I believe it's the job of Kaya Kallas to go to Turkey and speak with President Erdogan in order to defend the interests of Cypriots as citizens of the Union that she serves. I believe Kaya Kallas spends a lot of her time and effort towards Ukraine, which is not even a member of the EU. But what message does that send to EU citizens like us in Cyprus, still in a divided land? Kaya Kallas must make Cyprus a priority so we can show the world that the EU stands by its people. I love you all.
Thank you. Urmează domnul Łukasz.
Next is Mr. Łukasz Kohut.
Panie Przewodniczący.
President, Commissioner, a common enemy brings people together. And for Turkey and EU, that enemy is Russia. 10 years ago, we saw what an important partner Turkey was. The agreement between Donald Tusk, President of the Council, and Turkey, we limited migration. And it should be still today. It's one of security is the priority of the Polish presidency of the EU. Cooperation on the Black Sea. Working together on defence issues. It's a time now to intensify our search for a just peace in Ukraine. The Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, should make accession a real possibility for Turkey. We shouldn't be closing the door to them in these difficult political times. The prospect has to be real, but of course, to make it real, Turkey has to make progress on democracy and human rights. We mustn't forget that. Thank you.
Urmează Andreas.
Next, Andreas Schieder.
Werte Kolleginnen und
colleagues, the 19th of March, the Mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, was detained, and this was not just a strike against one politician, but it was against Turkish democracy in its entirety, and many others were also detained on the same day. This is the last bastion of the political opposition. They're trying to silence the political opposition. So now that the government has the entire democracy in its grasp, hundreds of thousands of people going out onto the streets week after week, they're demonstrating. Journalists, people are protesting, and also the opposition party are engaged in this. The Erdogan regime is deviating from democratic principles, also deviating and moving away from its own people. And this, we say that the Erdogan regime has no place in Europe. So full support for the demonstrators, and we need to receive the release of Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Thank you. Elizabeth Vozenberg-Vionidi has the floor.
Κύριε Επίτροπε, στις παρούσες
Commissioner, under these circumstances, there is no European path for Turkey, and it says so in the report, for rule of law, for the protection of fundamental rights. They're backtracking. Freedom of press, democratic values. Turkey is not complying with its commitments for stability and security in the Eastern Mediterranean, on good neighbourhood relationships, and that's a huge issue for the European Union, constantly undermining the sovereign rights of Greece and Cyprus, the blue homeland, the patriarch's role for the Orthodox, the lack of cooperation for illegal migration, and the threat of war for 12 miles in the Aegean is the reflection of a country which is obstinately pursuing this policy against the resolutions of the European Union and the UN. Unfortunately, colleagues, the abyss between Turkey and European values is still unbridged, and it is Turkey's responsibility that it is so.
Mr. Christoph Gomar has the floor. No. Davor Stier has the floor because Mr. Gomar is not present.
Thank you, Chair. Turkey is a candidate country, but for years it has been seen as a regional power in the Middle East with stronger political engagement in the Balkans, in Central Asia and in Africa. Turkey is not seen as part of the West, but unlike Russia, Turkey is not increasing the conflict with the West, and especially problematic are relations with the Muslim Brotherhood. Turkey, however, is not willing to open a conflict with the West, and in this area, in this space, we can find some space for relations, for dialogue. So, in brief, today's Turkey, although it doesn't want to be part of the West, it does not either need to be in conflict with the West. This means that we can enact a pragmatic cooperation, but without renouncing our geopolitical interests and our values.
Hadis from ECR, do you accept? Mr. Hadis?
Αγαπητέ συνάδελφε, έχετε πει...
Dear colleague, you've said that Turkey is not in conflict with the West. Let me remind you, it's threatening Greece with war. Greece is part of the Western world. It occupies illegally territories of the Republic of Cyprus, and you haven't said a word about that. Is that the European future of Turkey, which you want to include here with us?
Thank you, dear colleagues. As I said, well, if you had heard better, you would have heard this comment too. Our position is that we need a pragmatic cooperation, but without renouncing our values and our political interest, which means that we want to defend the interest of our member states, including Cyprus.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Reinhold Lopatka.
Dear colleagues, this report is both timely and necessary. Yes, Turkey remains an important partner for the European Union, politically, economically and strategically. But a strong partnership, however, must be based on shared values, on a commitment to democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights. Let me underline clearly, respect for the sovereignty and sovereign rights of all EU member states, especially the Republic of Cyprus, is non-negotiable. Moreover, persistent shortcomings regarding fundamental rights, democratic backsliding, and compliance with the European Court of Human Rights are deeply concerning. Therefore, I think that the report's conclusions that accession negotiations should remain suspended until Turkey demonstrates clear and substantial progress is moving in the right direction. It is appropriate to show in a clear way Turkey our disappointment. If there is no progress at all, I think it will be better to stop the negotiations with Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mihalis Hadjipanter.
Today, in this debate on the progress of Turkey towards accession, it's our duty to deal this blatant indifference of Turkey to international law and its European commitments. It's been 51 years since the illegal occupation and invasion of the northern part of Cyprus, and Turkey continues to ignore the UN resolution and its commitments to the EU. For 51 years, thousands of refugees have no longer had the right to go back. Their churches, our culture, our civilization are being defiled. dear colleagues, Commissioner, could you imagine being thrown out of your house with guns, to not be allowed for 51 years to live in your home? I don't need to imagine it. I am living that. I am a refugee and I can't live nor visit the house I was born in. Every day reminds me of this injustice. One Saturday ago, the Turkish president visited illegally our occupied territories and provoked us using nationalistic discourse and showing contempt for international legality. And all this with no reaction by the European Union. The European Union can no longer remain silent. The European Parliament has to react immediately and directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please try to keep within the allocated time?
Who have signed up for Catch the Eye. I will start with Kostas Mavrides. Pentru un minut.
For 1 minute.
Thank you. The rapporteur, I have to admit this, had a very difficult task at hand. And this report is a list of findings that show that Turkey is totalitarian and neo-colonialist in the Ottoman way, because it does record that Turkey failed to subscribe to the criteria in accordance with which it was granted a candidate status. Today, it is an anti-European power following its own agenda, continuing to occupy the territories of the European Union in Cyprus and elsewhere. Now, normally speaking, we only have two choices: either impose sanctions or to put a stop to the accession procedure. But the Commissioner said nothing. To the contrary, she proposes strategic cooperation. Commissioner, what you are proposing is a strategy for hypocrisy, and your duty is to defend the values of the European Union.
Sebastian Tingenen is next.
210.
210.
Yes. Turkki ei ole vapaa demokratia.
Turkey is not a free democracy. It is a country which systematically destroys human values. A dictator, Erdogan, who rules dictatorially, has turned his country into a society in which the free media is suppressed, the opposition is imprisoned, and the judiciary is subordinated to an instrument of power. The recent annual report of the European Parliament is unusually clear. Turkey is moving away from almost everything that the European values stand for. Now it is time for us to say it out loud. Turkey has no place in the European Union. It is not enough to freeze Turkey's EU membership negotiations. They must be stopped immediately. We cannot keep the door ajar to a country whose membership in the EU would destroy all the principles we believe in here. So close the door now, EU.
Mulțumesc. Urmează Sebastian Everding.
Thank you. Next is Sebastian Everding.
Frau Kommissarin.
Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, I would like to just look briefly at the situation in Turkey and animal protection there. The Turkish Parliament actually adopted some legislation that could mean death for millions of street dogs. It's dramatic. We're talking about daily collections of stray dogs being taken somewhere or maybe even killed straight away. It is a dramatic situation. It is cruel. And we also know that there are hundreds of dogs being buried alive or in bin bags, or they're beaten to death. It's awful. And with that as a backdrop, I think you have to also bear in mind that the population is growing very quickly in this country. We need to make sure that we find a solution that is respectful of animal rights. And that is why the Turkish government should make money available for animal protection. So, dear colleagues, please support my motion addressed to the government of Türkiye. Put an end to this massacre of stray dogs.
Vielen Dank. Ultimul vorbitor la Catch the Eye.
Thank you. And the last speaker in the catch, the eye procedure is Nicolas Maratouris, 377.
Ζητώ την απελευθέρωση του Σουηδού δημοσιογράφου.
The liberation of the Swedish journalist who is being prosecuted in Turkey right now because of having insulted President Erdogan must be dealt with. We must call for the prosecution of Erdogan for the continuing occupation of the Turkish part of Cyprus. Turkey is an occupying power which has invaded Cyprus, has a presence in Syria, and it is shocking to see that we continue to discuss the possibility of Turkey becoming a part of the EU and part of our shared security and defense system. This is unbelievable. The EU must have a different response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Commissioner Kos, you have the honor
answer to so many questions from the colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear honourable members. I thank you for all your questions, recommendations, and an interesting discussion on this report. And I can tell you that the Parliament's concerns are the Commission's concerns. I believe that continued engagement with Turkey will be essential in refining and deepening our understanding of shared priorities. At the same time, it is important that Turkey clarifies the nature of the relationship it wishes to pursue with the EU and aligns its actions accordingly. Ultimately, the depth and quality of our cooperation will depend on mutual commitment and a constructive approach on both sides.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Commissaire.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I now call the Rapporteur, Nacho Sanchez Amor.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you, Commissioner. There is a question that cuts across all of this. Why don't we close off on the accession procedure definitively? I'd like to look at that. Some of our colleagues on the right have expressed a kind of socio-cultural incompatibility. I don't understand that. It's like the EU giving Turkey the opportunity. This goes back years, but don't confuse Turkey with Erdogan. Erdogan is not Turkey, nor vice versa. Now, if we shut the door, well, the last local elections, the opposition won, not Erdogan's party. So let's look at the party, the civil society, which is imploring us to not shut the door, to not leave them hopeless in terms of changing the country. In 10 years' time, Turkey may have changed. It may be committed to the European cause, and we need to wait. Pro-European, pro-democratic civil society that carries on demonstrating against repressive policies. Now, why don't we defend European flags in Istanbul like we did on the Maidan? There's a lot of vibrant, active civil society that wants to carry on towards the EU, and this Parliament needs to listen to that voice, not just the voice of a few governing people who hopefully are there temporarily. This goes back years. My previous colleague, Katy Perry, we had the accession procedure suspended but not ended because that would need unanimity and that would be difficult. So please think about the criticism that we all share that Turkey hasn't used its opportunity, but don't go with that very tempting idea of confusing a country with its leader. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le.
Thank you very much to the rapporteur. That concludes the debate, and the vote will take place tomorrow. Before we continue with our next debate, I would like to welcome some young people who have come from Serbia and who are following our discussions from the public gallery. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for being in attendance and with us here today, young people.
L'ordre du jour appelle
In accordance with our order of business, we call now the report tabled by Mr. Pizzula, 2023 and 2024 reports on Serbia. I would like to straight away give the floor to our rapporteur, Tonino Pizzula.
Hvala lijepo, gospodine predsjedavajući, poštovana povjerenice, kolegice I kolege, zadovoljstvo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President. What a great pleasure to greet you here today, having drafted this report on Serbia. It took me several months to work on this report. It's my first report. I have to say it was a difficult task from a personal point of view. Sometimes there were personal attacks, manipulations, non-diplomatic language, but I really tackled this with professionalism, with good intentions, with faith. I believe in the opening of this common European project, and I also believe that this is useful for the country concerned as well as candidate countries as well as member states. We had discussions with colleagues here in the European Parliament. We got in touch with various stakeholders as well. We contacted them. We assessed the report on Serbia together. We also went to Serbia. I went there and I also studied documentation. And that allowed me to gain a good understanding of the situation in the country. It's very complex, and it's been particularly complex these last few months. The Novi Sad station disaster, where 16 individuals lost their lives, that collapse, I think was symptomatic. Nepotism, unlawful activities, inadequate controls. We're talking here about a country that really has serious shortcomings when it comes to the media regulation authorities. That's not really working properly. Also, private data, personal data is made available to the public. Illegal means are used also against people. And the citizens of the European Union have been thrown out of the country because of activities on networks. And the members of the European Union people are pointing at the finger at them, saying that they are behind all of this. And it seems to me that Serbia consistently refuses to align itself with the policies of the EU. Now, when you vote in the UN, for instance, you might say it's a mistake. Serbia has, of course, made a lot of progress as well, particularly when it comes to competition or growth. Good progress there. But I also think that it needs to improve internal dialogue, the fight against corruption. It should also reach an agreement concerning the status of Kosovo, and it should align itself with others. We're talking about also a full implementation of OSCE reform recommendations. That would be necessary, and the BDMR. I think that all of this has been flagged by the European Commission itself in its reform plan. Now, the economics is one thing, but it's not the only thing that we take a look at as the European Union. After all, the EU isn't just a single market. Billions have been invested into Serbia over recent years, but we have to also address the question of communication. For instance, communication from the leadership of the country doesn't really reflect all of that. Also, the question of public procurement and the way in which that is being carried out. All of this has consequences for the economy. The European Union also needs to be clear as to its own position and look at what it's doing itself when it comes to the rule of law, or when it comes to bilateral trade, and when it comes to the investment of European resources, particularly in those places where we can actually yield a real effect. Investments into the judiciary, fighting corruption, etc. I believe Commissioner Kos was in Serbia last week, and I understand things were said quite clearly, unambiguously, and she has our support for that. At the same time, we've heard the statements of the leadership of the government of Serbia. They don't seem to be credible when it comes to the question of integration into the European Union. After all, we have to remember that there are frequent trips made to Moscow, and we also know that there's mention of energy agreements or contracts. And I don't think anybody else can be blamed for these problems that might have arisen. I'm pleased to see that students have come to Strasbourg. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your points of view with us. And in fact, this is something that I mentioned in my report. I believe that we have common targets, common objectives. You're studying, you're in your country, and you can make your voices heard. And in fact, you can speak, I think, more clearly and with greater credibility than, let's say, government leaderships. The European Parliament would need to approve, of course, enlargement. We are still in favour of enlargement. That continues to be the case, but it has to be an enlargement that is in sync with our European values and with our geographical position. Thank you very much, says the President. I now call the Commissioner, Mrs. Koss.
The President, honourable members, dear Rapporteur, Mr. Tonino Pizzola, I'd like to thank you for your dedication and the members of this Parliament for your ongoing engagement with Serbia. Your work reflects our shared commitment to Serbia's European future. The European Commission remains firmly committed to supporting Serbia on its path to EU membership. Accession is more than a technical process. It is a decision to embrace a future rooted in democracy, dignity and shared responsibility, and this can be only done through a whole of society process. During my recent visit to Serbia last week, I engaged with political leaders, civil society organisations, students — welcome, dear students, tonight — academics and women shaping public life. Across all those meetings, I delivered the same message. The momentum for enlargement is real, and Serbia has a historical opportunity to join the European Union. Accession negotiations will require resolve and leadership. Reforms are essential, not for the sake of Brussels, but for the benefit of Serbia's citizens. And for the last 5 months, this is what citizens are demanding on the streets. Serbia should therefore step up its efforts and deliver concrete results in fighting corruption and strengthening the rule of law. The independence of the judiciary must be protected. Media must be able to operate freely. Electoral reforms should ensure that every citizen can vote with trust and confidence in the system. These reforms are not only key to Serbia's progress on its European path, but they are also imperative to exit the current political impasse and divisions in Serbian society. Civil society must have space to act. Independent voices must be heard and protected, and we must work together to build resilience against disinformation and manipulation, which weaken the social fabrics and erode democratic trust. Intimidations and pressure on civil society is not the way we operate in the Union and must not be tolerated. I welcome the move to relaunch the selection of a new Council for the Regulatory Authority for Electronic Media, REM. If this process is genuinely open, transparent and inclusive, involving all relevant stakeholders, this would be a key step toward restoring trust necessary to exit from political impasse. I'm ready to engage in bringing all the political stakeholders and civil society together to accomplish commitments Serbia has given to the EU last December. To constitute independent council for the Regulatory Authority for Electronic Media, adopt remaining media laws and adopt the recommendations of ODIHR on electoral legislation. I also emphasised during my visit to joining the European Union means sharing not only benefits but also responsibilities. Our Union is built on common values, including a common foreign policy. In a time of war of aggression on our continent, engagement with Russia cannot continue as if nothing has changed. There cannot be business as usual. Silence or hesitation undermine the very principles that underpin our peace and security core principles the European Union is built on. We face global challenges that can only be managed together. Together with Serbia, we want to focus on a common future in a united, stronger and safer Europe. Progress also means moving ahead with the normalisation of relations with Kosovo. This is essential for regional stability and for Serbia's journey toward EU membership. Constructive leadership in the region strengthens trust and opens doors for cooperation. Dear members, we want a truly democratic and economically prosperous Serbia inside the EU. This was also the vision of Zoran Đinđić, who dreamt of Serbia embedded in a family of democratic, modern and developed countries. I count on your continued support for this to become a reality. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner. David Ivo Stier, please.
Predsjedniče, klub EPP-a će podržati ovo izvješće koje je precizno I
We will support this report, which is very precise and objectively represents the successes and the shortfalls in terms of the path to accession. The report talks about growth of GDP, economic growth in investments and so on. We're pleased to see Serbia's agreement with Frontex on border management. However, there are still issues within rule of law and normalisation, standardisation with Kosovo in terms of good neighbourhood, and Serbia, which is number 105 in the corruption index, which is below the average for the EU. In Serbia, people aren't confident, they don't trust in institutions, and that's clear in social dialogue. Student demonstrations have shown that that kind of government can't carry on. The fight for the rule of law is essential, but criticisms of the government rejects the so-called Serbian world, and the conclusion of Serbian associations is to question the sovereignty of neighbouring countries, and so we await the normalisation of relations with Kosovo. Regarding external policy of the EU, that needs to be brought into line. The door is open. So, candidate countries, leaders of candidate countries can't go to Moscow and take part in Putin's parade.
Is very clear. On May 9th, let's celebrate Europe Day, not Putin's parade. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, chers collègues.
Thank you very much, my dear colleague. Next speaker, Kathleen van Bremt.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear Commissioner, I interpret your speech just now that you still believe that Serbia will join the European Union one day. You're not. But then it's time to step up. Because we are losing Serbia today. The rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights, they're all under threat. And imagine this. Today Serbian students are braver than the European Commission, maybe the whole of the European Union. They're the ones highlighting the systemic flaws in Serbian democracies. They're the ones fighting for civil liberties, and they're the ones exposing and condemning widespread corruption. Commissioner, they are fighting for European values, and they deserve our full support. And it is not compatible with what the European Commission today is doing in their approach of appeasement, which damages the European credibility today. And I know, we support you, and I know you think alike, but the European Commission needs to be much more forceful in the way they communicate. And as we speak, there's a delegation up there, but there's also a delegation running to Brussels, and they will be in Brussels on Monday. And dear colleagues, when they arrive, will we then, all of us, welcome them with open arms? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, cher.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. And next speaker, Mrs. Kinga Gál.
Biztos asszony, elnök úr.
Madam Commissioner, President, the stability of the Western Balkans is in the interest of the whole EU, and Serbia, of course, is a key country within that equation. We have a strategic interest and a defence or security interest to support this country. For 20 years now, we've had a procedure for accession. In a way, over that time, I think that the Union has lost credibility in the country. As responsible for the Patriots, on this particular dossier, I would like to say that I find this report too one-sided. I understand that there are certain things that still need to be done by the country, but at the same time, we need to take note of the fact that the country is dedicated to the European Union, has made efforts, energy policy, family policy, or indeed minority policies in order to look after, for instance, the Vojvodina Hungarian community. But unfortunately, the report doesn't talk about that. It really emphasizes the shortcomings, and I'm afraid it is ideological in nature. It is distorted. When it comes to our EU policies, we can't have double standards, but unfortunately, an ideological approach is sometimes adopted. And I think that is becoming more and more clear, particularly if you look at the way in which these things are addressed nowadays. When it comes to Ukraine, you want to fast-track the country's accession, but what about the candidate countries in the Western Balkans? Why are they being left on the margins here? The integration into Europe of Serbia could help us put a brake on illegal immigration. It could help us in terms of energy, long-term supply of energy resources. It would be in the interest of the EU, it would be in the interest of Hungary to have a Serbia that is stable and that is a part of the EU, and that is why we support their accession. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker, Stefan Bartolica.
Zahvaljujem, kolegice I kolege.
Thank you very much.
Stanje u Srbiji. Svi znamo da to nije zemlja.
Thank you very much. We need to look at the situation in Serbia objectively. It's not a Western-style liberal democracy. They are still subject to national myths. That's still the same. With Croatia, there's no normalisation until Serbia takes up its responsibility for the aggression of the 90s, until they meet the damages for victims. That's a minimum in terms of sign of trust. The message for students: now, it's good that you are in favour of European values, and that is appeasement with Croatia for you as well, and recognising all the crimes made to our peoples in the 90s. We need to recognise the truth. That's essential. There's no progress without it.
Brandstätter. Thank you. Next speaker, Helmut Brandstätter.
Dear colleagues, first of all, thank you very much for the cooperation for the report. I went to Serbia last week to talk to parties of government and opposition and to the civil society, and of course to mourn the victims of Novi Sad. 16 people died there. When I was in Serbia, I realized how terrible the oppression of the free media is, how the secret service is spying on and wiretapping opposition groups and the civil society, how meanly Vučić is speaking about the opposition, calling them political pedophiles, and how deeply corruption is rooted in his system. The catastrophe of Novi Sad was not bad luck. It was a result of corruption. And thank you very much, Commissioner Kos. We've been there together, and we talked to young people, we talked to the civil society, and they explained to us it's corruption. And this corruption brings more and more people, not only students, also professionals, workers on the street. And the majority, they want to live in Europe, they want to live in the European Union just like us. And I really have to tell you, you, the young people, but also the other older people, everybody in Serbia, you are part of Europe, you're part of the European Union, you are welcome here. But the regime of Vučić in this form cannot enter the European community. Mr. Vučić, don't stand in the way of the future of your people. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Vladimir Prebilic.
Spoštovani,
Ladies and gentlemen, 1st of November last year, since then, the country of Serbia really has changed. Look at the students and what they did. They lit a flame, and that's been seen now around the world. It's also been something symbolic of the spirit of democracy throughout the whole of Europe. It's very significant, very important. It means that we still have hope. Hope is there in the classrooms. Hope is there on the streets. The students were demanding a future based on democratic values. President von der Leyen recently hugged President Vučić, and the EPP seem to look the other way. I think that's actually sending out the wrong message. We want Serbia to be in the European Union, but as a democratic state, as a successful state. We have these young people, and these young people deserve a good future, and the future of the young people of Serbia is in Europe, and it must be based on democracy, not on fear. Dear students, dear citizens of Serbia, we hear you, and we stand by you. You are not alone.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Della Valle.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, we've decided to abstain on the vote on this report because we're not in agreement with the imposition of that majority. With this two-standard approach, that happens all too often here. You can't deny the problems that are afoot in Serbia, which have been afoot for a long time. You need to speak out about the issues with other accession countries such as Ukraine, Turkey, and so on. But you can't. Can you deny what's going on with human rights in Egypt? The EU is funding it to the tune of millions without changing anything. We've tried to improve this text, talking about the role of student protests over the last few months, which is a sign that in Serbia there are movements towards democracy in civil society amongst the new generations, such that the Prime Minister stepped down. Looking at the demonstrations, people have been arrested, and that means there's no popular democracy anymore. We need to have proper debates talking about the real problems in Serbia and the progress that Serbia has made in terms of dialogue, but also moving towards democracy and true elections. What we've got instead is an aggressive text which aims to culpabilize the political choices. This attitude will make Europe fall apart. We don't want to play into Putin's hands, but looking at the victory on fascist Nazi.
Thank you. Next speaker, Michal Szczerba.
Dobry wieczór. Pani Przewodniczący.
Good evening, Commissioner, Madam Commissioner, President. 6 months ago, the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, went to Belgrade. And in Belgrade, he spoke about the European future. He made that offer to the society of Serbia. What was the response? Well, the absence of Mr. Vučić, who did not attend the summit of heads and state and government of Europe. We know what is happening with Mr. Putin. We have to take a decision. Who are we going to celebrate the end of the Second World War with? Will it be in Moscow, in Kiev? Who will we stand by? The society in Serbia also needs to make a strategic choice. It's about values, and it's high time that we adopted these values. Should we have democracy or should we have authoritarianism? Should we have free media or not? What about war criminals? Should we have protection of war criminals or a partnership with Europe? These are decisions to be made. It is very important to help Serbia, to take Serbia out of the clutches of Vladimir Putin, help it become independent, and for that we need clarity. Thank you. The next speaker is Thijs Ruijten.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, dear Commissioner, we demand impartiality, not neutrality in enlargement processes. And the Commission could no longer turn a blind eye to what's happening in Serbia. Civil society intimidation, media suppression, state capture, autocratic drift. And yes, cozying up with Putin made it worse. But that is not the core of the problem, nor is Kosovo. The real issue here is the government's unwillingness to truly choose the European path. The students didn't ask for dialogue, they want rule of law implementation. The Commission's reluctance to attach political consequences or honest communication eroded the EU credibility. We want Serbia in the EU, but not like this. Dear Commissioner, be aware of the broad majority that in this House is seeing this clearly and supports you, so feel supported in being impartial, not neutral, in supporting those pushing for real reform, and to tell the truth to the government and the people. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. There's a blue card. There is a blue card from our colleague Sokol.
Tomislav.
Tomislav.
Vous avez...
Thank you. Mr. Reuten, you are very active in the delegation of European Parliament in Montenegro. So my question is, you know that there are Vucic's proxies in the government and in the ruling coalition of Montenegro. So what do you think about this situation, and can Montenegro advance towards the European Union while you have people like Andrija Mandić and Milan Knežević in the ruling coalition? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very creative to involve another country here, but I think I have been very clear in the delegation of Montenegro on my position there. I have been clear also today, I think, on Vucic. So I think we will have a further discussion on that very soon on Montenegro. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Antonio Tunja, Korea.
Monsieur le Président.
President, Commissioner.
It's very simple. Serbia is the most important country in the Western Balkans, and it's a black hole in the heart of Europe. Serbia must join the European Union, period. And I must say that the fault is ours, because the Commission, mainly the Commission, all these years did very little, and then came the Russians, and then came the Chinese, and we were away. The other thing is relations with Kosovo. Well, it's very easy to say. But what about the 5 European Union countries that do not have relations with Kosovo? Kosovo independence was declared illegally by Resolution 1244 of the Security Council. So don't push Serbia into Serbia cannot be pushed. Pushed in other things. Civil society, rule of law, closeness to the European Union and so on, but not what they cannot do. Serbia was proposed a European future 24 years ago. I know because I was there. Till today, there is no European future for Serbia. Thank you.
Merci. Christian.
Thank you. Christian Teresh.
Thank you.
Dragi colegi,
Dear colleagues, I will vote against the report on Serbia because it doesn't reflect a balanced approach on the challenges that this country is facing. Of course, Serbia should continue with reforms and align to EU standards, but the report does not mention real progresses, and it risks undermining trust between the EU and Serbia. Belgrade has taken real steps in the Vojvodina situation, and its efforts should be recognized. Serbia has also met all the criteria on opening cluster number 3, but the Commission has not moved forward with the process. The EU also has a responsibility in shaping the regional context. The fact that it recognized the Kosovo independence created tension that was used by Russia. Serbia showed that it was determined to get closer to European values, and we should strengthen its commitment, not discourage it. We should help it continue its European path with the conviction that it should be.
Thank you.
Irena Joveva.
Sistemska korupcija, vedno hujša represija.
Corruption, terrible repression, water cannons, police violence, summary arrests. This is all happening. It's the values that we should be defending that are being undermined. Democracy, not only on paper. We shouldn't underestimate how serious the situation is in Serbia, and there are double standards here, manipulation. Particularly in terms of the rule of law and democracy, you have shown that deeds follow words, and that is what von der Leyen said about Vučić. Just days later, what happened in Novi Sad? Ignorance kills, President. Literally. You should be a paragon of European values. You need to show that. Words follow deeds. Is that not correct?
Merci.
Thank you, President Gordon.
Poštovana povjerenice, izvjestitelju
Thank you. Reading this report on Serbia, I think it emerges quite clearly that Serbia finds itself in a bit of a cul-de-sac when it comes to integration. It's at an impasse. We have problems with corruption. We have problems with the media, the freedom of the media. Pressure is being exerted on teachers, on students. This is actually what daily life looks like in Serbia right now. But at the same time, there's another Serbia that's woken up. They're against the regime. Students are taking to the streets. Farmers, citizens are demonstrating and have been doing so for months. In fact, students have cycled here to Strasbourg. Some of them are also running. Some of them are here with us right now. So it is quite clear to me that there is an alternative voice in Serbia, one that really cherishes democracy. It is time now for us to open a new chapter in the European Union.
Juras Mažylis.
Dėkoju pirmininkė, komisarė, kolegos. Stabilumas vakarų Balkanuose nėra įmanomas, kol Belgradas žaidžia dvigubą žaidimą.
Thank you very much. Stability in the Western Balkans is not possible as long as Belgrade continues to play a double game. Russia is spreading disinformation through Serbia, throughout the region. It is fueling ethnic conflicts there. And Belgrade's refusal to join in on the EU sanctions against Russia is not a show of neutrality, but rather clear support for the aggressor. Russian propaganda on Russia Today and Sputnik and growing pro-Russian narratives in state media show us that Serbia is becoming a tool of the Kremlin, with which the entire region is being destabilized. Serbia's rhetoric is seeping through yet again. This behavior is incompatible with the aspiration of EU membership. I agree that the Commission must make it clear to Serbia that it is moving away from the principles of democracy and the rule of law. The commitment to European values must be a real commitment, not just words. It's time to put an end to things.
Thank you. Andreas Schieder.
Sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und
colleagues, Serbia for years has been in a critical situation. Irregularities with elections in 2023. The restriction of media freedom, pressure on journalists, on public broadcasting, corruption, nepotism around the family of the president, and at the head of all of this, lots of death in Novi Sad. The issue is, in this country, Alexander Vučić. He's the problem. He has put Serbia in a vice and done the same to the democracy. We should be proud of civil society and the thousands of students from Serbia that are resisting. They want just one thing. They want reform. And they want a country based on the rule of law and democracy, and for things to be clean. That's what Europe's for, which is why we support Serbian students with their fight for Serbian democracy.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Anna Maria Vicek.
Thank you very much, President. We're really sad to see that, just as in previous iterations, this Serbia country report is imbalanced, it is politically biased. It doesn't give you a real reflection of the genuine progress made, and it's really not taking into consideration the geopolitical sensitivity of this region. Commissioner Kos was in Belgrade recently, and she said that she and the European Commission support the university students. Now, the demands of the Commission should deal with institutional reforms. The Commission's demands should not be there to support certain groups which are actually polarising society, which are aiming at toppling the government, or which are using anarchic means in order to prevent institutions from working properly, preventing young children from going to school, or using violence to prevent professors and teachers from going to work. The duty of the Commission is to provide stability and to help strengthen institutional functioning. It's not there to interfere with internal affairs in Serbia. The Hungarian members of the Patriots for Europe group in this Parliament fully support the membership of Serbia of the European Union. That would be in the interest of our Vojvodina Hungarian community, of Hungary and also Europe.
Tonin Matej.
Thank you. Tonin Matej.
Komisarka, predsedujoči, drage kolegice.
Commissioner, members, I come from Slovenia. It's a country that was once part of Yugoslavia together with Serbia, and it's actually quite ironic that it was practically at the end of the Second World War that we thought that we had dealt with totalitarianism, and yet we are still engaged in establishing the basic democratic principles when we thought we had left that all behind us. When communism fell in Yugoslavia in the 1990s, we were convinced that freedom and democracy would be self-evident, but this is not the case. We continue to fight for freedom and democracy. We see the student protests in Serbia, and this is a symbol of this struggle. They're defending a fundamental European values, and there are more and more people standing by their side, and it is a grassroots movement that deserves our support. The European Union must be clear. It's no longer a question of just a progress report. It is a matter of the credibility of our union. A path to the EU does not lead through authoritarianism and nepotism, but rather through the rule of law, media freedom, and responsible governance. The European Union owes clear support to those who are fighting for European values.
Thank you. Thank you. Thierry Mariani.
Contre la Serbie,
This assembly doesn't know what to make up about Serbia anymore. Reports and reports. This one is ideological more than it is an effective assessment. Belgrade hasn't committed any crimes except not thinking like Brussels or refusing to sanction Russia, and particularly supreme sacrilege, not bending to Pristina. This text has political injunctions, biased criticism. The EU report of 2023 and 4 on Serbia, however, said it was economically successful and unemployment was going down. The report talked about technical progress in 31 of the 34 negotiating chapters and clear commitment in Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. Now, this resolution closes its eyes to anti-Serbian violence in Kosovo. It's two standards. When Serbia defends its people, it gets condemned, but Brussels looks away when that happens with Kosovo. You want to make Serbia bend to you, but it's a free nation. It defends its interests and wants sovereignty. What's shocking for you is normal for me. Accession to the EU shouldn't be an instrument of blackmail geopolitically, or that the EU doesn't want other countries to think differently. I defend freedom of people and their destiny. Thank you, Tomislav Sokol.
Davno ti je vrag zasjeo na
Thank you. For a long time now, we have known that Serbia is an authoritarian country in different parts of society, and in particular when it comes to the media. The authorities are using the media. Mr. Vučić tried to organize a meeting with Mr. Trump, but he manipulated the situation. In fact, he fell ill. We're not quite sure whether he will feel any better before he goes to Moscow for the parade. What are we talking about here? Politics of hegemony in Serbia. Remember the war in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, 1991. Remember Montenegro, where they are trying to peddle their influence. Also, the Serbian Orthodox Church plays a big role in this equation. Serbia's problems go well beyond the question of Mr. Vučić. Serbia needs to undergo catharsis.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this debate. We've got 4 catch-the-eye requests. To begin with, Lucas Folas.
Κύριε Πρόεδρε, θεωρώ πολύ παράξενο ότι ως Πρόεδρος Επιτροπής Σερβίας Ευρωκοινοβουλίου.
Thank you. And it's interesting that as the chair for the Serbia group, I was not given the floor during this debate and had to request the floor during the catch the eye procedure, but that's something I will discuss with my group. Serbia needs to become a member of the EU. We need Serbia and Serbia needs us. There are a lot of problems with accession countries. And we talk about this, we give them a European perspective. Even with Turkey, we're talking about prospects for European membership. And now we want to close the door to Serbia and push them into the arms of Putin. I think we need to be clear, if we want to have Serbia with us, we need to be open with them. And if we don't want them, well, we need to be open to them about that as well. We shouldn't simply be always trying to stymie their progress. And if we do that, they will turn away from us. And then, as some colleagues have already said here, they will end up in the arms of Russia. And we don't want that. The people of Serbia need to have European prospects. There are problems, good. Let's talk about them, but we cannot close the door to them.
Thank you, Matthias Nemec.
Politično stanje v Srbiji radi opravičujemo stabilokracijo, a stabilnost.
The situation in Serbia is put to lack of stability. There's no stability, there's protests and a lot of relations with Russia. Since last November in Belgrade and other places, people have taken to the streets. Everyone is asking for democracy and truth and change that we all want. People are protesting for freedom because of corruption, financial lack of transparency. Students are running literally to Brussels to put across the message that the Serbian authorities are diverting from European values. They are thinking about the future of the country, and they can't do that on their own. That's up to Serbian politics, and the Commission is showing very clearly that membership doesn't mean a ringing till. And Serbian politics needs to show that they're taking this seriously.
Christian Vigodin.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, Serbia remains a key partner and an essential part of our shared European future in the European Union. Its path to membership must remain open but strictly conditional on real progress in democracy, rule of law, fight against corruption, media freedom and protection of minorities. As the 2023 and 24 Commission reports underline, progress has been made, yet serious shortcomings persist. Most telling, I believe, are the mass civic protests led by Serbian students recently, sparked by the canopy collapse of the Novi Sad train station that tragically claimed 16 lives. They were not just about the victims. They exposed the deeper public frustration with unaccountable governance, misuse of public funds and erosion of democratic norms. These protests are not a threat to stability. They are a call for it, a call for normalisation and democratic accountability. There is no need for fundamental change in EU's approach towards the country, although we must remain clear about the values we defend. Our assessment should take into account the complex geopolitical position of Serbia. Respectful but firm communication is a better option than disengagement, and this is what those hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters expect from us. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Sebastian Tinkinen.
Mr. President, there should
there should not be a place in the European structures for a country that continues fence-sitting while Russia keeps bombing Ukraine. Serbia must make a choice: align fully with the core values of Europe, or choose to be on the wrong side of the history. I will make this very clear. Russia is not a partner. They cannot be trusted. It is a destabilising authoritarian aggressor waging war on European soil, using disinformation and energy blackmailing as means to gain influence. Serbia cannot walk both roads. If Serbia wants to seek EU membership, they must act like a future member. That means sanctions on Russia, respect for rule of law, and a decisive break from Kremlin's influence. It is that simple. There is no EU path without it. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Pour conclure ce...
Thank you. To conclude this very rich, interesting debate, I'd like to give the floor to the Commissioner, Kos.
Mr. President, honourable members, today's debate reaffirms our shared goal to support Serbia in advancing toward the European Union. The time for progress is really now. And during my visit, I encouraged the authorities to work across society to find a path forward, one that reflects the hopes of the Serbian people and especially the young generation. I listened to the students, to academics, to the civil society organization and invite them to consider the EU offer which will bring to the country political and social transformation, introducing more pluralism, democracy and inclusiveness. Democratic change takes root when people shape it themselves. It cannot come from outside. Lasting transformation comes from those who live the reality and carry the responsibility of shaping their future. And I trust that people in Serbia will take the right choice and seize the historic momentum. The enlargement momentum offers Serbia more than negotiation chapters. It brings opportunities for investment, integration into the single market and economic development through the EU growth plan. It is only the EU membership perspective and cooperation with the EU that lifts societies, strengthens institutions and creates lasting prosperity. It offers something no alternative can, a future grounded in freedom, accountability and opportunity for all. We will continue to engage with all those in Serbia who are committed to building an open and inclusive country. Our common goal is a democratic Serbia thriving inside our Union, and we will stand by those who are working day by day to bring Serbia closer to this goal. I thank this House for your unwavering support. And Kathleen, dear Kathleen, I really believe that there is a place for Serbia in the EU, and I will work on this. But I cannot do this alone, so together we can really help make Serbia's European future a reality, and I count on all of you in the European Parliament. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la...
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That's, to wrap this afternoon, Rapporteur.
Thank you, President. I'd like to thank all of those who contributed to this debate and supported our proposal, and also those who have a different view to this. I'd particularly like to thank the shadow rapporteurs and the assistants for their excellent work together. Thank you for your contributions to this report. Serbia's road into the EU is a complicated one. It's something that won't be achieved overnight, and it won't be achieved without major reforms in the country. However, nothing will change without the necessary political will on the part of those who are responsible for the current situation in the country. The long history and the long story of polarization and the issues with the key criteria and the fight against corruption and the questions of rule of law all lead us to a situation where Serbia is not coming closer to the European Union. Rather, its position is stagnating. For too long, the country's government, for some time, the government has been using EU resources while neglecting the geopolitical leanings of the Union. So Serbia is a candidate country with a very important role in the Western Balkans, and so we need to continue to keep a close eye on the political situation in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the debate. The vote will take place tomorrow. The agenda brings us to Mr. Teras's report 2023 and for Kosovo. I would like to give the floor to the rapporteur, Rio Teras.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Dear colleagues, today we have the honour and pleasure to present the Parliament's report, which we prepared in response to European Commission reports on Kosovo from 2023 and 2024. What I want to remind you today is that the Kosovo War ended little more than 25 years ago. To this day, wounds and scars remain in society. They can only be healed together with Europe by offering a European future to the people of Kosovo. For the people of Kosovo, the European Union is a goal to strive for. This is also very clearly reflected in the country's political landscape. All major political parties consider the European perspective to be equally important. As the standing rapporteur for Kosovo, I am convinced that much has been done to reform the economy, strengthen the rule of law, and build a European way of life. At the same time, we cannot ignore the shortcomings, which I also gained a closer understanding during my fact-finding visit that took place last December. Kosovo must ensure the independence of the judicial system, as this is the foundation of the rule of law. Media freedom and transparency of media ownership are also very important. The continuation of the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue is absolutely vital for keeping the European course. We have addressed these and several other issues that need improvement in the Parliament's report. As rapporteur, I would like to emphasise above all that in today's global competition, where the authoritarian states are trying to establish footholds and bridgeheads, we cannot allow grey zones in Europe. The interests and activities of Russia and China in the Western Balkans are no secret to anyone. We see the activities actively pushing the agenda, especially in the neighbouring country, where anti-democratic tendencies are growing fast. I would like to emphasise that in a situation where we demand reforms from Kosovo, we must be also ready to support them. Therefore, we call for the immediate end of the European Union's punitive measures. They have been unfair and unnecessary from the beginning. The European Union funds many projects and programmes that are designed to support the reform agenda in Kosovo. That is why we should abolish the measures and let them work with the money we offer. In addition, we call on those European Union member states that after 25 years have not yet recognised Kosovo's statehood to do so. Dear colleagues, we will be voting on the Kosovo report tomorrow, and I will kindly ask for your support and your vote. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le rapporteur.
Thank you to the rapporteur. I now give the floor to Commissioner Matakos.
Dear Mr. President, honourable members of the European Parliament, dear Rapporteur, Mr. Rio Teras, I'd like to thank you for your work on the report, but also other members of the European Parliament for engagement on and with Kosovo. I would like to start by welcoming the parliamentary elections held on February 9th. They were peaceful and competitive and with the participation of all communities. They were held under Kosovo's new electoral framework, implementing recommendations from successive EU election observation missions. It is now in Kosovo interests to swiftly form its institutions in order to take forward urgently needed EU-oriented reforms. Among these, the signing and ratification of the agreements related to the Reform and Growth Facility should be treated as a priority by the new government and assembly. This would enable the release of funds under this instrument, provided that all other conditions are met. Kosovo should also step up efforts on judicial reform, media freedom and public administration. With regards to the draft resolution, the European Commission shares your general assessment, which reflects the main findings of our 2023 and 24 annual reports. Overall, the authorities remain committed to Kosovo's European path, and Kosovo has engaged constructively on the growth plan, approving an ambitious reform agenda covering 5 reform areas. Implementation of this reform agenda will be key for Kosovo and its citizens to enjoy the full benefits of the plan and to move forward on its EU path. Kosovo also continues to align voluntarily with EU sanctions in response to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, another proof of its strategic orientation toward the EU. Visa liberalisation entered into effect on January 1st, 2024. Let me thank again the European Parliament for its support and cooperation. This has been an important step long awaited by the people of Kosovo. Kosovo submitted an application for EU membership in December 2022. The Commission remains ready to prepare an opinion on Kosovo's membership application as soon as the Council requests it. I am aware that there are still many obstacles to overcome, but I would like to underline that the Commission will contribute all its technical expertise and support once it is asked to do so. The 24 European Commission report also highlights that the government and the opposition should work to forge cross-party political support to pursue EU-related reforms more effectively. This will also be crucial for the future government's mandate. This would notably enable Kosovo to build on the progress already achieved and to take the work further, including the necessary strengthening of its public administration reform. Concerning the EU-facilitated dialogue on the normalisation of relations with Serbia, I wish to highlight the importance for Kosovo to continue demonstrating a strong and a constructive commitment. There is no alternative to the dialogue. Advancing on normalisation with Serbia remains a key requirement for Kosovo's EU aspirations. This means implementing obligations stemming from the Ohrid Agreement without further delays or preconditions. It is also essential that Kosovo refrains from causing tensions in the north. Dear members, it remains the Commission's priority to support Kosovo on its EU path. Kosovo and the entire region belong in the European Union. They are part of the European family, and we will stand by Kosovo on its journey to Europe.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you, Commissioner. Ivo Dauerstier.
Thank you, Chair, and let me begin by congratulating Rio Terras for his report, which is fully in line with the recommendations approved by this Parliament delegation at the Stabilisation and Association Parliamentary Committee with Kosovo. And it's particularly timely to stress today that in 2010, at the request of Serbia, the International Court of Justice concluded that Kosovo's declaration of independence did not violate the international law. Therefore, it's misplaced to use the case of Kosovo as an alibi to justify Putin's actions in Crimea or in the Donbass, or to compare it to secessionist forces in Europe, frequently also backed by Putin's Russia. The EU should also fully embrace this ICJ conclusion and finally grant Kosovo a candidate status. Moreover, it's time to end the European Union's unbalanced and unfair approach towards Kosovo. It is time to lift the sanctions. At the same time, we expect Kosovo to form a new government after the February 9th elections and to implement the obligations assumed at the Brussels and Ohrid agreements. In addition, the protection of all minorities should be a priority. As I heard in my visit to the small Croatian community in Janjevo, it is important to avoid assimilation and rather promote their integration into Kosovo's society. Dear colleagues, Kosovo is a young democracy that we should support as we should support this excellent report. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, chers collègues.
Thank you. Eudebates next.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Commissioner, first of all, my thanks to you for staying to the end of this session so late in the evening. I will try to be brief this hour of the day. Let me say I absolutely stand behind everything that you have said. But if I were to just say that, it wouldn't look good on television. So I'll say a few more words than that. The organization of the elections, was subject to an observer mission from the EU. And as we saw, they were very well organized. This is a huge sign of improvement. But difficulties remain, as you said. First, with respect to actual implementation on the ground of the measures that have been taken in law, there's a difference between what the law and the legislation says and what one actually sees in the country. The whole question of media freedom also continues to be a major issue. And then, of course, there's corruption, the cancer of corruption. I personally am concerned about the whole question of freedom of religion. Then, of course, there is Serbia. We absolutely need to ensure there is dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. Kosovo is making progress. It is taking steps forward, but it needs to continue to work before it is in a position to be able to accede to the EU. And we are open to that idea. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Prime Minister. Mathieu Vallet has the floor.
Merci, monsieur. Thank you very much. Thank you, President. It is late, admittedly. Ladies and gentlemen from the Commission, the report that we're talking about here tells us that we have endemic corruption in Kosovo and bilateral relations are very tense with Serbia. We know all of that. But we turn the other way when it comes to security issues. The population of Kosovo, the fact that they've sent a disproportionate number of people to join Daesh, people who are moving freely through our countries, in my country, with weapons circulating as well. And we all know that there is a link with the Bataclan attack, so there's a real issue concerning weapons. Notwithstanding that, you would like to push forward the accession of Kosovo, and you want to have a free visa regime with Kosovo, even though 5 member states don't recognize the sovereignty of Kosovo. We are very concerned about this. This territory is far, far removed from our criteria, from our values. So all I can say to you really is that it's difficult enough for us to communicate as 27. What about other countries that don't meet our criteria, don't meet our European standards? We cannot really expect them to support a union for all with our values.
Thank you. Ivailo Valche.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Commissioner, colleagues. I would like to thank the rapporteur and the colleagues we worked with on the report. We should emphasize that Kosovo is a stable partner, consistent in its commitment to its European path, including in the context of its tensions with Serbia, where we see a consistent approach to the provocations concerning Serbia's sovereignty. In January 2023, a petition was submitted to Kosovo's parliament concerning the Bulgarian minority in Kosovo. The Bulgarian minority should be recognized along with its historical contribution to Kosovo's society. In historical, political and geographic terms, the Western Balkans are a part of Europe. That's why we support their EU membership. This is a long-term investment in peace and cooperation in the region. Thank
you.
Yeah, my absolute dream is Austrian farmer.
Well, if you didn't want the Austrian farmers, you kept that lovely.
Integration with strong public support for EU accession, the implementation of visa liberalisation and its steadfast alignment with EU foreign and security policy are encouraging steps forward. However, significant reforms remain crucial. While progress in justice, security and economic resilience is evident, challenges persist in judicial independence, media freedom and fight against corruption. Strengthening democratic institutions and ensuring the full implementation of rule of law reforms are imperative for Kosovo's European path. Finally, the EU must recognise Kosovo's commitment and provide tangible incentives, including clearer accession prospects. Kosovo's European future must not remain in a grey zone. It is our collective interest to support its journey toward full EU membership. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Thomas Weitz.
Thank you, Chair, Madam Commissioner Kos. Kosovo has developed towards a modern rule of law state and is still developing towards a modern rule of law state. And yes, there's still things to do and they are not yet there, but they are developing really well. It's a country with 100% foreign policy and security policy alignment, which is really impressive in this Balkan region. It's a flourishing democracy and they once again have proven that they are a flourishing democracy. They have increasing living standards. They have a young and well-educated population, but still they are blocked to join international organizations. They could be a front runner in the accession process, but they're still blocked in even starting the accession process by the outcomes of the Serbia-Kosovo war of the 90s. And I clearly call on Serbia here to finally make peace with their neighbor and to recognize their neighbor to move on towards European future. And I strongly call also on the non-recognizers, the 5 non-recognizers within European Union to lead by example and to free the way to finally start accession talks with Kosovo. I thank the rapporteur for the good cooperation and I thank Madam Commissioner for her good words. Thank you very much and let's work it out together.
Merci beaucoup, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. Merja Kyllönen is next.
Arvoisa herra puhemies,
Mr. President, Kosovo has come a long way from the shadows of war towards peace, from instability towards democracy. The people of Kosovo has demonstrated that it has a will to build a more stable and peaceful future. The progress in strengthening rule of law and democracy has been encouraging, but there is still a lot of work left to be done. Anti-corruption measures need constant commitment and we need cooperation with decision makers in Kosovo. The EU must ensure that the security situation is stable enough in Kosovo, not just for EU accession, but to secure the everyday life of the Kosovars. The door must remain open for the people who, for the nations that fulfill the criteria. Not, it must be done in a just way. We must hear their voice. We must build together bridges instead of walls. I want to warmly thank the rapporteur Teras for a very constructive cooperation. It was nice to work together. Let's continue together. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Next is Stanislav Stoyanov.
Thank you, President, Commissioner.
When we talk about Kosovo, we need to stand by the principles of democracy and the equality of all ethnicities. It is deeply worrying that the petition of 500 citizens who self-identify as Bulgarians has not been examined by the National Assembly. This undermines Kosovo's engagement with the rights of minorities. Currently, Bulgarians are not considered part of the ethnic Bulgarians. I cannot support the quota of 50% men and women in electoral lists. Currently, the electoral law already has a certain threshold for the representation of the genders. The free will of citizens and the quality of applicants need to be what is most important. It should not be specific quotas. The Belgrade-Pristina dialogue needs to continue. We should not be using the dialogue as an instrument, rather the report as an instrument of social engineering. Every country has the rights to have its own legal principles and traditions. We take account of Kosovo's progress when it comes to specific aspects of transport connectivity. However, more needs to be done in the sphere of railway transport. Good connectivity is a prerequisite for the development of the region. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Liudas Mažylis is next.
Dėkoju pirmininkė, komisarė, kolegos.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, members. Kosovo is consistently following the European course. It is implementing reforms, it is supporting Ukraine, and it is coordinating its foreign policy with the EU. The greatest threat against the development of Kosovo comes in the form of propaganda coordinated by Russia in channels operating in Serbia. Following the Banska attack in 2023, there was a large-scale disinformation campaign that was aimed at destabilizing the entire region and halting Kosovo's integration into the EU. And this is not just a problem for Kosovo. Rather, this is a strategic attack against Europe and its values and security. Russia continues to have interests in the Western Balkans. We must therefore not only support Kosovo's efforts to join the EU and NATO, but also strengthen resilience throughout the region by investing in the fight against disinformation, investing in cybersecurity, and supporting independent media. We should not be criticizing Kosovo. Kosovo is a target of Russia in the region, and so we must support and encourage the courageous people of Kosovo.
Spoštovana,
Thank you. Mr. Nemec.
Kosovo je v zadnjem letu pokazalo jasno politično voljo za napredek.
Kosovo over the last year has shown a clear political will to move forward on the European path, particularly shown by electoral reform, economic stability and fundamental rights. We would like to see more momentum in the reform process, in justice, public administration and a free and pluralistic media landscape. Those are fundamental democratic values of the EU. Dear citizens of Kosovo, with today's debate, we're sending you a clear message from Europe that your country's future lies in the European Union. We stand firmly behind that, which is why I support Kosovo's membership of the Council of Europe, integration into international organisations and the start of the assessment of its EU membership application. It's also crucial that Kosovo's membership of the Union is clearly supported by Kosovo's citizens as well as politics. This is an opportunity to give new impetus to the approximation process, starting with a new chapter in the talks between Pristina and Belgrade.
Thank you. Alexander Sell.
Vor 26 Jahren
26 years ago, NATO bombed Belgrade. Support came from Germany, from Joschka Fischer more specifically. This was the first time that German troops were deployed outside of the country since the end of the Second World War, and it was a Green foreign minister in Germany who approved the move. And it really did damage Germany's reputation around the world. Bombs containing uranium were dropped on the territory, This is supposed to be green politics. At home, they're against nuclear power, but abroad, they're prepared to use nuclear weapons. Green politicians use these principles only when they suit them. A quarter of the population of Kosovo has now left the country. 3 billion euros of support from the EU to Kosovo have just vanished, and we have a real crisis. Now, you want to take this country into the EU? Well, we're not going to play along. 26 years down the road, we need to acknowledge that this was a mistake. It was a mistake to let the Greens into government.
Merci.
Thank you. I've received 2 requests for the floor under the Catch the Eye procedure. Thijs Ruiten was first.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, many have spoken, including the Commissioner, about the non-acceptance of Kosovo's EU membership application. The Council lectures Serbia on normalisation of relations with Kosovo, but is not capable of doing so itself, although Kosovo's independence has been reviewed by the world's highest court. But now, what's interesting is that the Council regularly approves conclusions on enlargement which, in its own words, cover the six Western Balkan partners. Yes, indeed, Kosovo is a partner sharing our values and geopolitical outlook. The Council continues yet to block the simple acceptance of this partner's membership application. Is this how you treat a partner? So, remove these restrictive measures, normalise relations between all EU member states and Kosovo, recognise it, and accept the application. And even without the acceptance, the Commission can already prepare the opinion on Kosovo's application. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Sebastian Tinkinen has the floor.
Mr. President, Kosovo's alignment with EU values and our foreign policy will not go unnoticed. Unfortunately, we have had to witness how third country actors are trying to destabilise their process. The usual suspects, Russia and China, are openly backing Serbia trying to undermine Kosovo's independence. Through disinformation, diplomatic pressure and media manipulation, they are aiming to weaken Kosovo's statehood and fracture their unity. Moscow spreads lies. Beijing blocks global recognition. Their influence corrupts the truth and destabilises the peace in the Balkans. We must support the Western Balkans through diplomatic means. Kosovo is not in the EU, but they are a part of Europe. Russian and Chinese influence has no place here, not now, not never. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Nous arrivons.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our debate. I will give the floor to the Commissioner, Commissioner Kos.
Dear Mr. President, honourable members, many thanks for this debate, which recalled once again our joint commitment to Kosovo's EU path. During this debate, we have recognised many achievements made by Kosovo in the past years. This debate has also demonstrated the need for continued reforms and the continued existence of many challenges. In order to overcome the challenges, I want to stress the importance of constructive dialogue and regional cooperation. This is essential for Kosovo to make progress on its EU path. The upcoming 2025 enlargement package will be an opportunity to assess Kosovo's progress. First and foremost, we expect Kosovo to swiftly proceed with the formation of its institutions. We hope to see concrete action from the government on many of the key areas highlighted in our discussion. Further, let me highlight that we want Kosovo to take full advantage of the current momentum in the Western Balkans and to make full use of the opportunities offered, including through the growth plan in terms of socio-economic development, single market integration and the EU path. These reforms will bring prosperity, stability and peace to Kosovo and the wider region. Also in this context, I take good note of your call for the lifting of the measures imposed in reaction to the escalation of tensions in the north of Kosovo back in 2023. Provided that Kosovo continues to de-escalate the situation, time indeed seems ripe for starting to gradually lift those measures and also highlighted by the Council in its December conclusions. I count on you to remain engaged with Kosovo. More than ever, the EU needs to follow up on its commitments and to keep working towards our shared goals of making the EU perspective for Kosovo a reality. Dear Mr. Elio Di Rupo, thank you for your nice words that I'm still here, but I also thank you, a few of you, that you are here. The late hour is not the problem. My problem has been that I was freezing. It is cold here, so the next time I have to bring a blanket. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur. The last words are yours, and then we go home, and I will get a warm shower.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. The final word is to the Parliament. You're right. Our rapporteur, Mr. Terras.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. First of all, I would like to thank you all for your relevant thoughts and reflections. As I stressed in my opening remarks, it is very important to give the people of Kosovo an European perspective. It is equally important that Europe establishes its security and values space, which all that it entails includes Western Balkans. I very much hope that the stalemate that has gripped Kosovo National Assembly for now will soon be overcome, that the Speaker of the Assembly will be soon elected and the functions of the government will be formed. I also hope that this government, in cooperation with the institutions of the European Union, will do everything possible to restart the dialogue with Belgrade, and I am convinced that the immediate end of the punitive measures, as many times mentioned, imposed by the European Union is also a prerequisite for starting this dialogue. I therefore call once again lifting of these measures. I would also like to reiterate that any decisions with regard to future integration can only be merit-based. That is why I call Kosovo political establishment to eliminate the shortcomings that we have indicated in our report. I thank my colleagues again for their participation in the debate, and I hope for support in tomorrow's vote. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to the rapporteur. I'd like to thank all of you who have participated in this debate and who are still with us at this late hour in the evening.